YouTube. And I'll post the YouTube link to LinkedIn too. There we go. Sorry, give me a second. How's everyone doing? How's your Tuesday? Looking a little bit easier than mine, with a little bit of chaos here, but it's all good. Let me just post a link to LinkedIn where I have just failed at this a little bit. Yeah, so we're back to a few technical difficulties. Join on YouTube. And I'll pop it there as well. Right, my name is Will Critchlow. I am founder and CEO at SearchPilot, and there's really only been one story in the news in SEO this week, which has been the leak of some of Google's API documentation around how their search algorithm works. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. But among the mix, give you a little bit of intro and background and so forth. So yeah, I run SearchPilot. You can find me at Will Critchlow on Twitter and LinkedIn. And you can follow this live stream in either of those places normally. I'm having a few LinkedIn difficulties today, or on YouTube on the SearchPilot YouTube account, which is at SearchPilot. I can't even say it, at SearchPilot on YouTube. And if you want to be notified when I'm doing these kind of live talks, if you head to searchpilot.com/live, there's links to all the resources that you might need. You can get a demo of SearchPilot. You can read more about how enterprise SEO testing works, and you can join our email list to get regular SEO test case studies as well. So it's been a little bit chaotic this week. Last week my kids were off school. This week I'm my kids just come home from school, and it's yeah, just a bit more chaos than usual, but it's fine. So we're going to be talking about this this leak that has now been confirmed officially from Google, that the API documentation that was leaked is real, and I think that was kind of fairly obvious. If you haven't been following along, this was first published, I think, by Fishkin, and detailed analysis published by Mike King. Both of them have done a superb job. So let me just pull up my screen so that while I'm talking, I can show you this stuff. So this was Rand's original post, and he did a great job validating that they were real and diving into high level what we can learn from them, and some of the particular things that I think what was especially interesting was ways they contradict public statements made by Googlers over the years. And they're in quite some detail. It's like 14,000 different detailed functions and so forth, I believe. And it is a wealth of information, I think, particularly for any of us who are liable to geek out on this stuff. I've certainly found it fascinating, and yeah, since it was originally published anonymously, there's more detail from the chaps come forward who originally sent the information to Rand and to Mike. That it's hosted in various places with various different ways of digging more deeply into it. As I said, Google has now confirmed that it's real, and I think Rand and Mike have spent a good chunk of their last week explaining it to people, talking on the news and to journalists and so forth. And I think that's all really great, and it's wonderful for the industry to treat this kind of journalism seriously, I think. And so yes, this was Rand's posts. This was Mike's post, where you can see it. Can you see the scroll bar on this? This is a long post, and I very much enjoyed digging into it all. There's also, I think, it's worth calling out the post that Mike wrote, another epic post that Mike wrote on Search Engine Land, which was very much focused on lessons that can be learned from this data. And I've got some thoughts on that, and we're going to dig a little deeper into that in the course of the next half hour or so. But yeah, just I guess some high level stuff. It feels like it confirms a bunch of things, or at least, well, I guess I should give some context of what I think it does in terms of confirmation. I think, firstly, this was a leak. Best we can tell, this was not deliberately put out there by Google, which I think biases towards it being more useful. I saw, apparently independently, that it had been discovered by some other folks as well. Dejan SEO had written about having discovered it and not written about it immediately, and stayed in the background a little bit until the news came out. And he talked about how he thinks that all of this stuff is burned. It's no good. Is that Google, now knowing that we know this, is going to be taking countermeasures. And I mean, we'll see in a minute. I think it's a lot more interesting than it is tactically actionable. And as a result, I suspect that it probably doesn't require that level of change within Google. I think what everybody's written about this has emphasized, it doesn't tell us for sure what they're using or not using. The inclusion of something here doesn't mean it's definitely used, certainly not in the live algorithm. Could be used in evaluation, could be deprecated, could be very lightly weighted. It doesn't tell us anything about the weighting. So it could be lightly weighted, could be a very major factor. I also don't think there's necessarily reason to think it's completely comprehensive. I think it's possible that some data comes from other sources, other APIs, and that there are other factors that are not included here. So what this has mainly done is taken my confidence level up. Where there's a factor that I was pretty sure was in use, but hadn't seen confirmed from an official source, that confidence level has now gone to almost 100%, I guess, that it's a factor of some form or another, particularly where it's backed up by experiments. I think we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other areas of confidence or concern that it brings. Overarching it, stepping back from it, I think it does a couple of things. It gives us ideas for tests, in particular, things that we can try out. It gives us a shared language and a shared vocabulary, and very usefully, or most usefully, a vocabulary that is shared with Google. So it may actually help us communicate better in future with Google reps and get more specific answers to things, because they can refer to, or we can talk the same language. Maybe we'll see if that holds true. And I think it potentially enables us to validate our arguments for testing or doing certain things, because the business case can involve reference to the fact that that certain things are included in these docs, and therefore are more likely to actually be ranking factors. So the reason that I particularly wanted to talk about this today is that Rand wrote a follow-up to his announcement post that was based off a LinkedIn post from Will Reynolds and reference to a comment that I made. So I made this comment. I said, so far, I'm not changing any tactics. And I'd be interested to hear from folks who are. And Rand said this shocked him. And in particular on LinkedIn, he said there's only two explanations. Either you're not paying attention. I don't think he's directing this like specifically at me, but said, you know, if you're in this boat where you're not making changes, then either you're not paying attention, or you were somehow aware of all 14,000 potential factors already and had some kind of unique insight into things. For the record, I'm definitely not claiming the latter. I think I am expecting that there may well be ideas that come from deeper analysis of this data that are great test candidates. And you know, given that's my area of expertise, what we do at SearchPilot is run these SEO tests on enterprise websites, very large websites. Essentially anything about on-page, on-site SEO at scale is fair game for experiments and for SEO testing. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm anticipating that may be the case. All I'm saying is I think the emphasis here is very much on so far. So far, I haven't found anything in that class of things, of ideas for tests that I hadn't already had in some form or another. As I said, mainly this is moving from high levels of competence to very high levels of competence, that something is a factor of one form or another. And I think there will be changing success. It may be easier to justify running certain kinds of tests, or to make the case for or argue for certain kinds of tests, because we now know that Google has kind of officially, accidentally, officially confirmed that certain things are factors. So anyway, we'll come back to what I'm talking about in more detail, and specifically run through some of the things that Rand has learned from it and why they are different for me. But first of all, some things that have been confirmed, and I think Rand actually runs through them in here, but he's confirmed that included in there is a bunch of clickstream data, a bunch of traffic level data. This I don't think was a surprise to anyone. It was a recent surprise to have it confirmed, but we didn't need the leak. It was in the DOJ trial evidence, and variations on it have been around for a while. So this going back, when was this published? 2018. My colleague Tom Anthony, he's the CTO at SearchPilot, wrote this post on the Moz blog of confirming that Google was using Chrome usage data to measure site speed. And this was, I remember, a big deal when it happened. Tom managed to confirm this to John Mueller and announced it at our conference in San Diego, and then talked more about it, I think, at maybe at MozCon or somewhere. But we weren't sure up to this point how Google was in fact evaluating site speed, and there was a lot of theory that it had to be based on how Googlebot saw the site and so forth. And realizing that it was real world traffic data from Chrome was a big deal. And I think this was a real revelation. But as I say, the depth of what they're using, the amount of data that they're able to gather, that was a lot of that was exposed in the DOJ documents and trial materials, but it's there in this leaked API docs as well. Another thing Rand called out is site-wide factors. I think this was a surprise to some folks in that the prevalence of it, but again, Rand called out this wasn't actually new. And I actually enjoyed this one because it was something that I had managed to pin John Mueller down on stage when I interviewed him at Search Love London. I'd been really frustrated at the non-denial denials out of Google about whether they used any concept of site-wide metrics. And people would always, it really frustrated me, people would always ask the Google reps, do you use domain authority, or do you have a concept of domain authority? Which led to a very easy denial, non-denial denial, a very easy one of saying, no, domain authority is a proprietary Moz metric. Of course we don't use domain authority, which was a very frustrating response, because I think they knew that that wasn't what anybody was really asking. What people were asking was, Moz is trying to approximate a concept with their proprietary metric of domain authority. Do you, Google, have some related concept? Do you have your own concept of something at the domain level or at the site level that relates to any of these things? Trustworthiness, authoritativeness, and yeah, is there anything that operates at the site level? And John had confirmed that yes, we do have some metrics that are at the site level, some metrics that are more on a page level. So I'd managed to get this. This was a post that I wrote originally for the Distilled site that got migrated over to the Brainlab site when they acquired the Distilled agency. And so site-wide factors, we knew they existed. Again, maybe we'll find some new ones, some new ideas in the mix of the leak. It's just there's so much information. I'm definitely looking forward to more folks in the industry diving in, analyzing it, digging deep, and publishing more things. And I would definitely encourage you to do that if you're interested in these things and work in the industry. Please do publish and please do share. And I would love to hear your ideas and anything that you're trying as a result that works. And say I'm very grateful to Random and to Mike in particular for all of the hard work that they've done digging into all of this. And I think there's a ton of value in it. And I'll talk specifically about the ways that I'm getting value from it. It's just that it's not yet changing my tactics. So we'll see where you stand on that when I finish making my case. So other things that came out that we already knew to some degree, there were a lot of freshness considerations. So a lot of things around dates, last updated time, those kinds of things. And this was not particularly a surprise to me. We've seen this come up in our testing, even to the extent that we've been concerned about manipulation of it, where we've seen some freshness signal tests behave almost too powerfully and been somewhat concerned that they seem to work even when they're not backed up by real freshness. So that dial maybe has been tilted a little bit too far towards freshness in some areas of the search results. But I certainly wasn't surprised to see a lot of date and freshness related concepts in the API docs. This is an area where I actually think that we might come up with some new test ideas. I haven't come across them yet, but I think there could be new kinds of freshness signal that we maybe hadn't considered before, because there's the obvious explicit stuff, schema level, last updated date, those kinds of things. There's obviously information about just detecting when the page changes. There's also some concepts around the degree to which the page has changed or the degree to which it's fresh, which I think could be interesting to dig into a little bit as well. Make sure I think the aligned way to use this is to make sure that when we are genuinely fresh, that we are exhibiting all the freshness signals that we might hope to. So some things that were new to me. I didn't know, I think I may have suspected, but didn't know that there was a concept of explicitly allow listing certain sites and boosting certain sites. I actually talked about this in a recent week. I said, I think what I said at the time was we've always known that Google has a big red, right? They can downweight, downrank certain sites for certain queries or across the board. What we didn't know, and I said at the time, we could speculate and we could easily believe that they might have a big green button, right? The big one that boosts rankings manually for certain sites. And we now know that they at least have this capability. As with all this stuff, we don't know how much they use it, but it's there in the API. And it appears likely that they use it at least in some of the your money or your life type queries. So things like, there was a lot of talk of using it for health related things in COVID, especially. And yes, we don't know how much they do that, but it seems reasonable to see it there. I think on balance of probability, we thought this was more likely than not previously. And so, although it's useful to see it confirmed, it's not. This is not something that we were completely not expecting to see in there. We also saw Google talking explicitly about mentions as relating to links and so forth. That again, this has been speculated, and we could guess this from a lot of experiments. Toxic links, I think, is something that the industry has talked about a lot ever since, well, I mean, forever, but certainly since the existence of the disavow concept, disavow files. We knew that it seemed likely that Google not only wanted to devalue those things, but actually potentially use them as a negative factor. This had, I think, been explicitly denied, but certainly had been very much downplayed by the official line. But I think we could guess this, and regardless, although it's new, it doesn't change behavior, I guess, unless you were, I don't know, I mean, I guess, considering whether to disavow things, whether you were actively operating in the realm of links that could be considered toxic. For me, this is not changing tactical stuff. I did see the existence of this kind of commercial rating, so a commercial score, trying to evaluate how commercial the likely intent of someone who lands on a specific page or the page itself, what it's for. I think I'd again kind of assumed that there would be something along these lines, probably mainly for offering diversity in the search results or aligning the results with the searcher's intent. but yeah, hadn't seen that explicitly confirmed. There's also some really interesting stuff around effort scores, around, I think, content quality, possibly some speculation this relates to generated content, LLM, AI generated stuff. And I think that's really, really interesting and must be a fascinating area of information retrieval research. What I'm not sure about is how to actually use that in informing my tactics. We've run a lot of experiments about improving content quality and or downgrading it, but just understanding what level of content effort or investment is needed to do well in particular verticals. But yeah, knowing that that's encapsulated in an effort score, again, I'm not sure that that's particularly going to tell me what to do differently. I think there's a meta point here, though. It does very much prove that Google misleads. I've been on that train for a long time. I gave a presentation called "From the Horse's Mouth," I think 2018 or so, 2017 in San Diego, which was all about how to interpret official Google statements in light of all the ways that they mislead us, but deliberately and unintentionally. I think it's unsurprising that I don't think they owe us anything here. They don't have to tell us how their algorithm works. They don't have to have search liaison people. They don't have to have webmaster liaison people. I'm assuming that it's in that they think it's in their interest to do so. But who's to say that why they want to or what they think they get out of it? But they're under no obligation to tell us how their systems work. I don't think, and I don't assign any kind of moral judgment around this or ethical judgment around it. I just think that it's important for us to know that just because Google said something through an official spokesperson doesn't necessarily mean it's can be straightforwardly taken at face value. I think there's plenty of cases where it's in their interest to at least obfuscate or make it tricky to figure out how that's working. So Rand did explicitly talk about some things that he's changing. Did he put an image in here somewhere? No, I'm going to have to pull up the place in the video where he talks about it. So here we go. I think it's about no. Here we go. Let me try and let's try and be kind. Can we pick? Yeah, there we go. That's decent expression. Oh, hang on. There's another one there. Sorry, Rand. How are we gonna get the thumbnail good? It's tricky. There we go. Very, very enthusiastic Rand. That'll do. So these are the things that Rand says he's changing as a result of this. Going from one experienced author to multiple, going to one experienced author instead of multiple less well-known authors. Mike called this out as well as a potential change that you might make based on the data in this leak. This, to be honest, this surprised me a little bit, just because the concept of authorship has long been a known concept. There's obviously a lot of detail in the documents. I haven't been able to interpret any of it in quantitative terms. So I guess you might now be slightly more sure that it's true. I wouldn't have thought that delta would be enough to change behavior. But I guess meta point here, I spoke to someone off the record, a very, very smart SEO expert whose opinion I rate, who said off the record, the way he's framed it is saying, I've gone from 95% certain to 99% certain of various things. And for me, that just isn't enough to change behaviors. For the most part, 95% sure is strong enough to at least test them, if not use them. And so this specific one isn't changing for me. Fair enough. Good stuff if it's changing for Rand. Our approach has been a little different. I think we've been generally trying to build up the visibility of a broader set of folks on the team, which is something that we get a lot of benefits from. But that's obviously a very different environment where SparkToro is deliberately this very, very small team. And a lot of it is Rand's voice or Amanda's voice, and they obviously have their own visibility. I actually think, though, in Rand's case, if he's thinking this way, and probably for Mike as well, I think they should leverage their own brands. My suspicion is that they won't be able to hire higher profile writers than themselves. And so actually, I think what Rand should be doing is hiring, if he wants to leverage this, would be to hire ghostwriters and put more content out under his own name, rather than trying to hire people with a bigger visibility than he has at all. Balancing the zero-click mentality is an interesting one for Rand specifically. I think he was an outlier on this already in that direction. So we'd already tended towards wanting the clicks and hadn't completely gone down the zero-click route. But fair enough. So good. That's changed for Rand, not particularly a change for me. Link building from small sites. My sense of how PageRank-like algorithms work was a little different, but I should note that I've said before, I feel like literally everyone's intuition, including my own, is really sucky about how link algorithms work. But my sense had always been that it's disproportionately biased towards the rich getting richer, the big links being disproportionately more valuable than the small ones. So this one surprised me a little bit less, maybe. I also am not really doing any proactive link building these days, so I think maybe there is some effect of trying to go on Rand framed as things like going on bigger podcasts rather than smaller ones. That's maybe a, a position that he gets more of those big opportunities. I can say yes to a lot of the things that opportunities that come my way. So I maybe should put more effort into the big things, but I don't think it's because of the leak that I particularly should do that. Outlinking is an interesting one. I'm going to carry on doing this just as much. I'm not changing behavior here. I think it's a user experience thing, and adding authority to my writing for readers' benefit. I also think that, as far as I can tell, I haven't been able to validate any sense that it's in any way negative. So I don't think the lack of mentions is a problem. Outlinking is valuable for user experience. Maybe not for SEO purposes, but I don't think I'd ever seen any particular evidence to suggest that it was a big positive ranking factor anyway. Page title is surprisingly important. Yep, that's a great one, because if you subscribe to our case study email list, and if you don't, if you'd like to, you head to searchpilot.com/live. So this will surprise you less if you subscribe to our case study email list. We see a ton of statistically significant title tag tests. I often describe it as our highest hit rate kind of test. I think mainly because it affects both ranking and click-through rate. And so it's got this kind of double lever effect. Paid search advertising used to have whole jobs dedicated to optimizing the advert text and running different experiments to find the best kind of advert text. So it's unsurprising. I think it's even more important in organic because it can affect your ranking as well as your click-through rate, and it should be a huge part of anyone's SEO testing program. So this is a hugely important factor, but I wouldn't say surprisingly important. Just we already factored that particular one in. Mentions equals links. This is really interesting. I don't actually know what the tactic is that Rand is changing here. Maybe you don't bother with link reclaiming efforts. I have to be honest, I haven't really done any of that for SearchPilot, and for our customers, we don't really deal in off-site factors. So this one doesn't apply to me personally. I'm interested that this was something Rand was doing before, but I'm not sure this is really a tactic change. I think that what in the video here, what Rand has kind of segued to talking about things he's learned, rather than necessarily that the mentions equals links is something that's going to actually change tactical behavior. I'm going to put Rand back on his original thumbnail because I feel bad that he's been glaring at us for the last few minutes. So I want to talk a little bit about what do I think this leak is good for, because if I'm not changing my tactics, then am I interested in it at all? The answer to that is absolutely yes, I am interested. So what's it good for? Well, one thing that I'm not using it for, but I think it is potentially a goldmine for, is spammers. There's clearly opportunity to, if you're, again, no moral or ethical judgment intended. What I mean by that is if you're operating with domains that you're happy to burn. We're not, right? SearchPilot's own site is a brand that we're hoping to build for many years to come, and our customers they tend to be large organizations with established web presences. Some folks are much more up for churning through and looking for the loopholes, and so things like this insight that Google may only use the last 20 changes for a given URL, like there's potential exploits, potential things you can kind of dig into here. I think Mike talked a about a ton of these in the detail level information. So things like copycats, toxic backlinks, penguin backlinks, all this stuff. If you're doing certain kinds of attempted manipulation, should be very interesting. I already mentioned Dejan said everything is burned. I'm not sure about that. I think a lot of this stuff was speculated in one form or another. The level of detail we see in the API docs doesn't necessarily mean that it's obvious how to manipulate it. And I think there's definitely plenty of folks who are doing things I've already seen people talking about, crazy lessons they think they've learned from reading these API docs. So I'm not sure Google as a whole is going to see more successful manipulation based off it. I could be wrong there. So some of the good stuff, some of the things that I think it's valuable for. I already mentioned shared language, the fact that we can talk about these things, even some of the oddly named, the twiddlers and those kind of things. I think the fact that we have shared language is really powerful within the industry as we build up our collective knowledge, as we do experiments, as we learn more things about how the systems really work and really interplay. That overlaps into Googler's own language. I've, for a long time, taken bits and pieces of what we know from how Google employees speak about this stuff and used it in our own language because it brings authority and aligns us with the official line on that stuff. Like, for example, if you're referring to a search query and you put the query in square brackets, then that's the right way to denote that was the query that was being carried out. Because if you put it in quotation marks, that's ambiguous, because did you mean that the searcher used quotation marks or not? And that's apparently how it works. Google, I learned that many years ago, and since then I've done that, use the square brackets as the way of denoting the query. So if it was in quotes, you put the quotes in the square brackets. Those kinds of things, that applies 100-fold, 1,000-fold here. So we get lots of better understanding of the internal language at Google. We can ask better questions. We can understand other sources of information. So things like the DOJ filings, when we read those documents through the lens of information that we've learned from the API, we're going to get tons more second order information. The fact that we know what those subsystems are called, we know what they do, we know how they interconnect a little bit. I think that's going to be super powerful, super valuable to us. The biggest tactical change that I anticipate making, though I haven't found the things yet, I need to dig deeper, is test inspirations. So ideas for things that we could run experiments to validate or to discover. Excuse me. As I say, there's maybe some stuff around last modified date and significant changes to the page, this effort score, commercial score, some of these kind of things. I think we probably had most of those ideas already, or certainly I haven't concretely put my finger on specific tests that I want to run as a result, but we'll write about it when we do. Got a bit of a tickle in my throat. Look at this. Perils of live TV. 1 second. And I do think there's going to be some value in convincing stakeholders to try things. The fact that it's now official, if you like, that this is a thing. Oh, it was in the API leak, is going to become the new search liaison said this was a fact. That kind of effect. And I'm really losing my voice, so I'm going to have to wrap up there. But I'll answer more questions on Twitter and LinkedIn. I did put out a poll asking if people are mainly changing things or not. And you're going to have to go to my Twitter. So Will Critchlow, sorry to be losing my voice just at the end of this. But yeah, searchpilot.com/live or Will Critchlow on Twitter and LinkedIn. Take care.